Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Oh, sure. Now, here's David Waldman. Okay, well, here I am. Hi, everybody. It's Thursday, February 13th, 2020. It is, it's the day before Valentine's Day. How do you like that? And it's, we bring you here on Kagro in the Morning, Friday the 13th, but without the Friday part. That's because, of course, Friday will be the 14th. And today, Thursday, is the 13th. And just like all 13ths, I guess, I don't know. If you're one of those superstitious people, we're out of luck. We are without Greg Dworkin today, unfortunately. But it's good news for the kitchen contractors. They get work. And, of course, good news for the denizens of the Dworkin household who get a renovated kitchen of some kind out of it. I don't know exactly what's going on. But whatever it is, it's noisy. Too noisy to bring Greg in today. And, of course, Abby will be having a field day and enjoying things. And I guess maybe the neighbor goes to work early just to get away from all of it. So that's probably good for his company. Invest in that person's company. Buy stock in whatever that person does today, I guess, because productivity is going through the roof. I doubt very much whether that'll affect anything. But we've got plenty to get through here and no time to do it. Tomorrow, I believe tomorrow we'll definitely be off the air live. We cannot have a live show tomorrow. Too much happening on our own home front tomorrow. I don't know. I actually, at this point, am doubting that we will have a pre-recorded show ready to go for you, which gives me programming trouble and, of course, gives me heartache to leave you without a brand new show, especially when I have some fantastic new recorded segments that I could share with you, and I guess therefore could get away with recording something less than a full 2 hours by leaning on friends and listeners to the show who have sent in their recorded segments. So now I'm a little torn as to whether or not to use them today or use them tomorrow and force myself to fill in the rest, because there's plenty to do and plenty of long reads that we could do. The question is, do I have the time to do it? I don't know. And neither do you. Neither will you find out until the end of today's show, because that's the beauty of live radio. It's and it is live. That's and I only know this because Bill has told me that it's live, and for all I know, nothing's working. But I have the thumbs up from Justice. He says it's all good. So Daily Coast Radio is live now. We'll just say it. Without Greg Dworkin to hold me back, it is said here by Bill, not me, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, can finally let his hair down and do his Thursday show wild and free. In fact, that's it. We're doing the whole thing, no pants. That's what we'll do for just for fun. You can imagine it that way. If that ruins the show for you, imagine what it does for me. It's actually pretty cold in here. All right, so for the next 2 hours, laws no longer apply, so you can't report me for anything that I may or may not do with my pants, with or without, there's no authority you can appeal to. I am my own justice, just like our so-called president. And by the way, I'd like to see the paperwork on that one. We should have proceeded, I don't know, you know what, that makes me think. We should indict Trump, not just to challenge the OLC memo. Not that we're going to be able to do that. The people who are in charge of, who have the rubber stamps and the paperwork and the letterhead to do the indicting are on Trump's side. That's the problem. They shouldn't be there. He's not the president until he can prove it to me. Anyway, we should have actually demanded his paperwork as an overture to the impeachment proceedings. We definitely will. We do think you deserve to be impeached. We're just not sure you are actually president. And so maybe we should have just gone with the indictment right off the bat on that one. Mueller certainly should have. Things are falling apart in the Justice Department. Or I was going to say they're falling apart in the Justice Department, which is also true. Another way of saying the same thing. Perhaps then we dive right into what's been circulating today and in the last couple of days, catch up on some of the really crazy things that we haven't had a chance to talk about. We'll go into pocket here, and there's craziness all over the place. Actually, before we dive in, we'll give you this one interesting tidbit that I found fascinating. I love the language development angle on a lot of things. Etymology is fascinating, and the way language changes, evolves, and spreads among cultures is really rather amazing to me. And yeah, I think we've spent some time on it when talking about place names, especially in the United States, especially ones that are derived from Native American languages. And also fascinating, I guess, because of the sort of generally pervading anti-Muslim attitude fostered in the United States by paranoid Republicans. The interest I have in in noting when things that are or words that are in common use in the United States, or for that matter, numerals that are in common use in the United States, are revealed as having Arabic roots. Anyway, of course, well, this one is interesting and fascinating, and probably not great in terms of the political situation, but if Barack Hussein Obama can survive that stumbling block to his candidacy, certainly Pete Buttigieg can survive one too. Although, I mean, there are other ones that he might not survive, like having enough people support him to elect him, or even to nominate him, but that remains to be seen. And, it's something he could probably remedy along the way if he works on it. But first, he'll have to work on getting over this one. Pete Buttigieg's name apparently originally comes from Arabic. And we know that he is Maltese by heritage, I guess. Is that how people would say it these days? And Malta, of course, at a crossroads and would have had enormous influence from both European and Mediterranean and Middle Eastern and North African cultures. So no surprise that Arabic would have made its way into the cultural mix. Pete Buttigieg's name originally comes from Arabic, and it means literally, it is reported by Thomas Juneau here. Who is Thomas Juneau? Did you know Thomas? Well, you do now. He's an associate professor at the University of Ottawa. How do you like that? So anyway, he is an expert on the subject apparently, tweets on the Middle East and security and intelligence, and so I guess he knows a little bit about Arabic. So it means literally father of chicken. How does that mean? How does that work? Buttigieg. It's funny when you see it anglicized and spelled out, and then you see it in your mind's eye. Buttigieg. Buttigieg. Well, how could that possibly be? Well, it doesn't start with the B. It's just sort of got anglicized that way. Abu Dajjaj. I guess chicken, as anglicized here as D-A-J-A-A-J. Dajjaj. Which is, I don't want to judge here, but that's a stupid name for chickens. English obviously has the best name for chickens. You can name it whatever you want. Dajjaj. Here come the judge, right? It's a chicken, actually, what's coming here. But Abu, we recognize from a lot of Arabic names. Well, generally in this country, we would become familiar with them from various terrorist noms de guerre. But it's true. So Abu Dajjaj, chicken, father of chicken, Abu Dajjaj. And you can see how that would be shortened into and anglicized into Buttigieg, or Buttigieg, I suppose. We were taught that it was, Buddha Judge or what did they say? Buddha Judge or Boot Judge, just by way of getting ourselves familiarized with it and getting something close to the pronunciation that they used. Abu Dajjaj. That's really interesting. So, pretty fascinating. So yes, I guess the literal translation is father of chicken, but clearly that would have a slightly different colloquial meaning, and Thomas then says, as a number of folks rightly point out, my tweet is incomplete. Yes, Buttigieg comes from Abu Dajjaj, which literally translates as father of chicken, but in practice, at least in Maltese, he says, which he does not speak, it is more accurately translated as owner or keeper of chicken/poultry. Chicken farmer. I mean, that would be a better translation of it than father of chicken. I mean, he's not really the father of a chicken, but, and neither were his ancestors for that matter. But I thought fascinating linguistic turn-o phrase and a great reminder of what his background actually is, although being Maltese, we're mostly not familiar with that myself. And not a lot of widespread understanding of the culture, I don't think, here in the United States, but maybe he can change that. That's fascinating. I read recently on Twitter and then saw a great video on the subject, and now I'm going to have to dig that thing up, which also means making a note to myself to dig the thing up on the origin of the term for and word for the ampersand sign. It was really kind of fascinating how it came to be and how it developed and how it got its name. And I could probably explain it to you, but I'll just say that's not a great use of our time at the moment. But I will make a note to myself to include that video for those of you who are equally fascinated by it, unless there's popular demand on the Twitter hashtag, the KITM hashtag, within minutes, demanding the story of the ampersand. But you'll get it in your roundup. That's, I think, the best way we can do it. All right, let's see where to go next. Well, man, there's so much here. All right, first we'll get serious. How about that? We'll head over to Pocket, and we'll take a look at this piece in the New York Times, because it's an important newspaper. And it came out yesterday, and I guess we missed it. An opinion piece with which we can readily agree. Trump and Barr are out of control. But let's find out exactly why Bob Bauer, a White House counsel during the Obama administration, thinks that they're out of control. It's likely the same reason you and I think they're out of control, but with greater specifics and insider intelligence. Well, the subheader says, the prosecutor who quit over the Roger Stone sentencing is sending a powerful message about political weaponization. And I told you that there were 4 who quit the case. But I also told you that there were several, and I guess it's the 3 of them quit the case, but not the Justice Department. But a 4th said, to hell with all of you. I am also quitting the Justice Department. And that's the one the article focuses on. The resignation of a Justice Department prosecutor over the sentencing of Roger Stone is a major event. And, of course, the resignation of 4 of them is an even greater event. The prosecutor, Jonathan Kravis, apparently concluded that he could not in good conscience remain in his post if the department leadership appeared to buckle under White House pressure to abandon a sentencing recommendation in the case of Mr. Stone, the associate of President Trump, who was convicted of obstructing a congressional inquiry into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. 3 of his colleagues quit the Stone case, but remain with the department. Mr. Kravis left altogether, even though the president for years has derided federal law enforcement officials, accusing them variously of conflicts of interest and criminality and weakness in not pursuing prosecution of his political opposition. Mr. Kravis's is the first resignation in the face of these assaults. Dramatically forceful responses to Mr. Trump's assaults on rule of law norms have been all too rare. A resignation can set off an alarm bell for an institution whose failings an official might be unable to bring to light in no other way. I guess might be unable to bring to light. Probably we should have said in any other way. Or as effectively. It upholds rule of law norms in the very act of signaling that they are failing. It makes its point with power and transparency and stands a chance of rallying support from those who remain in place and compelling other institutions like the press and Congress to take close notice. The government official who resigns for these reasons is, paradoxically, doing his or her job by leaving it. Why did the Stone matter so clearly warrant resignation? The president has used Twitter to denounce and pressure department officials, senior administration lawyers, and the Mueller team. When he did that to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, his deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and the special counsel, Robert Mueller, they stuck it out. They must have thought that the best way to serve the rule of law was to hold off or humor the president, maintaining regular order as much as possible, even as Mr. Trump raged that he could not fully control his department. And there is a case to make for their choice. Mr. Sessions stood up to the president and adhered to his decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. Mr. Mueller was not fired and completed his investigation in the Russia matter. That's a matter of some dispute, by the way. But this time, the president got what he wanted. Mr. Trump attacked the department sentencing recommendation as an unacceptable miscarriage of justice that was horrible and unfair. And then the department did switch positions on the sentencing, criticizing its own prosecutors for failing to be reasonable in their recommendation to the court. Here I will pause to borrow from Twitter friends, just to let you know. I don't think I put this one aside, but I have to scroll back. But as I recall, some point yesterday, Twitter friend Illusory Tenant, who, as I recall, is is he in Wisconsin attorney? I think so. But at any rate, pointing out for everybody that for all the complaints about the sentencing recommendation that were made by the second sentencing recommendation was made by, of course, the Department of Justice. For all the complaints about it, that it's so unfair, Illusory Tenant does remind us, a felony, by definition, is an offense for which 1 year in prison may be imposed as punishment. Roger Stone was, of course, convicted by a jury of 7 felonies. And as he says it this way, I don't know, says even lawyers can do this math. So yeah, think about that. If you get convicted of 7 felonies, and a felony is something that by definition can, at a minimum, require a year in prison, then I think you're kind of stuck with the 7 to 9 year recommendation. There's just kind of no way around it. All right. Well, anyway, I thought that was an interesting point to bring up and share in the middle of this piece, but there's more. There's more? Yes, it continues. So, the department did switch positions on the sentencing, criticizing its own prosecutors for failing to be reasonable in their recommendation to the court. This, then, could be seen as the extreme case, whereas normally a lawyer might decide that working from the inside is best. The most responsible answer, that is, to the president's behavior. Still, if resignation had been seen earlier as viable, even necessary option, it's possible that we would not have arrived at this point. Mr. Sessions could have resigned over the president's public calls for him to ignore his recusal requirements or prosecute Hillary Clinton. If Mr. Mueller had resigned over the president's attacks on him and refusal to sit for an interview, he might not have completed his report, but he would have rendered a devastating and unequivocal judgment. And without a report he felt compelled to rely on, Mr. Mueller might have felt himself more at liberty to testify in detail to Congress. That's a thought, but I bet he wouldn't have. Resignation, while an act of professional conscience, can be effective in pushing back against violations of norms of impartial professional law enforcement insulated from public pressure. Political pressure, that is. According to the Mueller report, having been finally pushed too far, the White House counsel, Don McGahn, threatened to resign in June of 2017 over Mr. Trump's directive to fire Mr. Mueller. What did the president do? He backed down. That was then. Mr. Trump has established a new normal at the senior legal leadership of his administration. The rhetoric of Mr. Sessions' successor, William Barr, suggests that he accepts, to a disturbing degree, the president's desire for a politically responsive Justice Department. Mr. McGahn's successor, Pat Cipollone, defended the president in the impeachment proceeding with arguments of the kind, in tone and variance from the factual record, that you would expect to hear from Trump surrogates on Fox News. We can't know if a wave of resignations early in the administration would have made a difference in preventing or tempering the unfortunate appearance, and perhaps increasing reality, definitely increasing reality, that the administration of justice is being politicized. Come on, you can say it. During the Watergate scandal, the Saturday Night Massacre resignations by Justice Department leaders certainly made an impression on President Richard Nixon, who then appointed an effective independent prosecutor, Leon Jaworski. Resignations can be a shock to the system, just what is needed to clarify the issues, force Congress to pay attention, and alter a president's behavior. What government lawyers are prepared to accept, the conditions under which they are willing to work, still matters. Institutions can be severely damaged in one huge blow or whittled away. Of course, resignation as an act of protest is not a choice to be lightly made by those who join an administration and find themselves in disagreement with the president. It is not justified by policy decisions that a subordinate official would have made differently. But the president should not be able to command this loyalty when the conflict concerns something as fundamental as the professionalism and independence of the Justice Department, and involves a case in which the president has a direct personal interest and the defendant is a political associate. For senior administration lawyers to just manage these kinds of conflict, ignoring Mr. Trump's tweets and disregarding his inappropriate, if not unlawful, presidential orders, allows the abnormal to become normal and professional standards to crumble. The prosecutor who resigns rather than remain in a decaying institution is upholding crucial norms. To his credit, at least one lawyer has chosen to do this, even if it is the rare case, and it may have come too late to protect the Department of Justice from Mr. Trump's demands and Attorney General Barr's apparent willingness to accommodate them. Very true. Good point. And even watered down a little bit, quite honestly, but well worth reviewing so that we can make some distinction between resigning from the department entirely and resigning from the case, which I guess everybody really should be resigning from the department at this point, but we'll see whether anybody's really moved to do so. All right, let's see. Just a few minutes left before our first break. We can probably fit this one in. This will come as a surprise to no one, but it's worth mentioning, of course. Apparently, reported here in the Washington Post, Jim Jordan has been accused of many things, but in this case, accused of begging a former Ohio State wrestler not to support reports of sexual abuse. Imagine that. Colby Itkowitz reporting this one yesterday late in the evening, 9:25 p.m., which is how we missed this one yesterday. A former Ohio State wrestler accused Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, of course, of repeatedly crying and begging him not to corroborate accounts of sexual abuse against the university's wrestling team doctor that occurred when Jordan was a coach. Interesting. Surely Donald Trump has to believe this one because there's crying and begging involved, and you know how influential that is on his thinking. But he won't believe it. But interesting that he would cry. Cry me a river, Jordan. River Jordan joke there. How do you like that one? So this is the new Hastert rule, of course, and he's the new Denny Hastert, as it turns out, to no one's surprise. Adam DeSabato, the brother of Mike DeSabato, the whistleblower who exposed the abuse by Richard Strauss, testified Wednesday during a public hearing in the state legislature that when the story came out in July of 2018, he received a phone call from a tearful Jordan. Why does no one record these things? Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling on the 4th of July. That's a nice touch. Begging me to go against my brother. Begging me, crying for half an hour. I wonder what he was crying about. He was that sad about losing his career, considering what he'd done? I guess so. Well, that's all. Well, that's Adam DeSabato again, recounting the incident, and this according to video of his testimony. That's an interesting way of putting it. After all that, right? Jim Jordan called me crying, groveling, 4th of July, begging me to go against my brother. Begging me, crying for half an hour, Adam DeSabato said, according to video of his testimony. Now, according to a transcript of his testimony, I guess would make more sense. According to video of his testimony, it's like, I just saw him doing it. It's not according to anything. I saw him do it on video. That's a weird way of putting it. Anyway, that's the kind of cover-ups going on here. Not to mention the kind of weird usage of language. Jordan's spokesman said DeSabato's account was untrue. Another lie, said Ian Fury, Jordan's communications director. Congressman Jordan never saw or heard of any abuse, and if he had, he would have dealt with it. Yeah, sure, of course. Jordan, a key congressional ally to President Trump, who was recently named the top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, That's a great placement, given what he's just done. Has denied knowing about the abuse when he was an assistant coach on the Ohio State team, but some wrestlers have accused him of knowing and turning a blind eye to it. Well, justice is blind, so I guess he belongs on top of the Judiciary Committee. Great. Better than having him on top of his wrestlers, I guess. That was DeSabato's allegation during the legislative hearing on a bill that would allow victims to sue the school in the event of sexual abuse by a university-employed doctor. That sounds like a good bill and a great way around any issues over whether or not this should be talked about. He's throwing us all under the bus, all of us, DeSabato said. He's a coward. He's not a leader, he's a coward. He also accused Jordan of calling and pressuring other wrestlers to flip their stories. That's the kind of person Jim Jordan is, DeSabato said. Well, makes sense to me. I can believe it. Although Jordan's name has come up several times since the account of rampant abuse and misconduct were revealed, there has been no proof one way or the other about what Jordan knew. An Ohio State independent investigation into the abuse did not make conclusive determinations about whether particular employees knew about the abuse by Strauss, but a report issued in May said the coaches did know. It said Strauss, who killed himself in 2005, sexually abused at least 177 male students from 1979 to 1996. So he definitely had plenty of time to do this. In the midst of the Trump impeachment proceedings in the House, in which Jordan took an active and high-profile role, a new lawsuit was filed in which one alleged victim of Strauss's sexual misconduct said he had reported it to Jordan. Jordan has been named in one other lawsuit as having been told, but he is not named as a defendant in any of them. Trump referenced Jordan's wrestling and his physical fitness in a winding speech. That's a nice description of a crazy-ass speech after the Senate acquitted him of impeachment charges. You know what? There's really no reason to repeat exactly what he said about him. It's irrelevant. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I have at least one demand that insists that there is a large and growing crowd forming outside of KITM World Headquarters chanting, "We demand ampersand." This according to Asparagus Zucchini, who is exactly the kind of person I suspected would ask for this. Let's see. I'll share it with you, and I guess those of you listening live will be able to find it, and those of you on the podcast will have to scroll back in the Twitter feed. I'll just retweet the thing and maybe tag it. Of course, I have to press the right button in order to do it. I saw a tweet. Oh, wait a minute. Are you kidding me? All right. There it is. All right. I found it again. I saw a tweet a couple of days ago, and I don't know whether I saw it the day it was issued, but it's dated January 31st. So I think a couple days after. From who? Who is this? Sarah Papalardo, who is, look at this, editor and co-founder of Reductress. And she tweeted on the 31st, "I was today years old." I remember showing this one to my wife and having her, she's reading that she's not familiar with the online lingo. So I was today years old when I learned that. And she says, what does that mean? I was today years old. Okay, I'll have to explain that. But the point is supposed to be about ampersand, not about online lingo. I was today years old when I learned that an ampersand, you know what that is, right? The and sign, not the plus sign, but the sign that we read as the word and, that looks like, I don't know what, that weird squig, how do you describe it? The weird squiggly line. A little bit like the cursive G that they use for the General Mills cereal logo, if that helps you at all. The ampersand. If you don't know what an ampersand is, come on, get with the times. Anyway, Sarah was that day years old when she learned that an ampersand is a ligature for the word et, which of course is Latin and, et, etc., right? Et al. And I was just going to say etc. after that, but duh. Anyway, pardon me. Okay, I had to evict that frog. Anyway, as I recall, when I saw that tweet, and I will, I'll retweet it now with a KITM hashtag on it. It's a nice visual representation of how it, of what she means. Ligature being, of course, I guess that's the sort of mashing up, the combination of two letters, as you sometimes see in reading, I guess, either Latin or occasionally New Yorker magazine. I think they still use some of those, the AE ligatures and sometimes the OE ligature. This is a mashing up of the E and the T, and these various stylized ampersands make it a little bit more clear where that came from, because of course, there's a interesting difference between printers ampersands and the keyboard ampersand, but it all comes from the same place. And then somewhere in the middle of all that, there it is, I saw a reply to this tweet, and here I think I retweeted it at the time here, so I'll retweet it again with the comment and the KITM hashtag, and you can all find it, and we'll put it in the roundup and all of the great things that go along with that. The tweet of Greg Maturin, Maturin, who says that, includes in his tweet a short and fun video in the history of the ampersand. I recommend it, he says, and it's from a series called Chalking Points that you might find on YouTube. And in fact, this one is found on YouTube. The history of the ampersand. And it is, in fact, quite fascinating and long enough to put us in copyright violation if I were to play it. But there's a terrific explanation of where it came from and how it got the name. And if you're really super anxious and you can't wait, the shortest explanation for how you get the word ampersand, it comes out, this is very much like the Buttigieg evolution. The ampersand was originally, I guess, a part of the basic printer's kit that came with all of the letters. And for some part of antiquity, I guess, was considered a letter and or word, but a letter all unto itself, and it had a place in the recitation of the alphabet. And where, I don't know whether those in antiquity sang it to the same tune that school kids learn to sing it now. You're singing your ABCs. But the recitation would conclude, W, X, Y, and Z, as we do now, except there was also a place for the ampersand. But the ampersand wasn't the letter, it was a word unto itself. That is, a word, or a symbol at least, unto itself, different and separate, per se, you might say, and they did say that, than the letters A through Z. And so they literally recited it that way. W, X, Y, and Z. And, per se, and. Sounding separate from the rest of the letters, the and symbol. W, X, Y, and Z. And, per se, and. And, per se, and per se, and per se, and per se, ampersand. That's the evolution. Isn't that rather fascinating? Is it true? I don't know. I'm running for president on that basis, but who cares whether it's true or not? It sounds true, and it's truthy, and I like it, and we're going with it. And so there you go. I hope none of you wanted to learn any important constitutional tenets in the time I just spent on ampersand, because now you'll be out of luck. But I appreciated that, and we'll treat this as though it were a Friday show, because reasons referred to earlier. Okay, back to the serious stuff. I think that's really kind of fascinating. And apparently so do a few of the followers of the Twitter feed. So, okay, you can all have fun with that one. Other news that some of you might find slightly more relevant, if I can make my way back to it. Let's see. Wow. Maybe we'll hold on to that one and discuss it later. Here's something just sort of out of the ordinary. We haven't discussed it. Luckily, it's been discussed, covered by Daily Kos Elections. But I guess add it to the Republican gang stories mounting up. Just throw this one in here because it's in the way and thumbing my way through pocket. Florida bar, not the drinking kind, the lawyer kind. They drink too. But Florida bar investigating questionable loans to Republican congressmen already being probed by feds. Jeff Singer covering this one for Daily Kos Elections. And it's interesting, and you should keep up with the fact that it's out there. The Florida bar confirmed on Monday that it was investigating Republican Representative Ross Spano, who I really have no recollection of whatsoever, over loans made to his 2018 campaigns that have embroiled him in legal trouble since before he was sworn in as a member of Congress last year. Spano, who has practiced law in the state for decades and initially ran for attorney general last cycle, could face punishment from the bar, but that might be the least of his worries. In November, the House Ethics Committee announced that the Justice Department is looking into whether Spano violated campaign finance laws during his successful bid for the House in Florida's 15th District. In December of 2018, not long before taking the oath of office, Spano admitted he might have broken federal election law. Whoops. By accepting personal loans worth $180,000 from two friends, and then turning around and loaning his own campaign $170,000. That's $10,000 cash back at the ATM, for those of you keeping track of the numbers. That's a serious problem, because if you loan money to a congressional candidate with the intent of helping their campaign, you have to adhere to the same laws that limit direct contributions, which in 2018 capped donations at just $2,700 per person. You can't give $180,000. You can even as a loan. It's got to be the same $2,700 per person that a straight up donation is, because people forgive loans all the time. Otherwise, you just say, "I'll loan you $180,000." Forget about it. You pay me back when you get around to it. Spano recently offered a new excuse for his actions by telling WTSP that he thought what he did was permissible because he believed that then State Representative Frank White, who was one of his opponents during his short-lived run for Attorney General, had done something similar. Another guy was a crook, so I thought I could be too. Well, all right. No. Actually, no. Especially if you're actually both running for Attorney General. I thought it was okay because somebody else did it. Well, did you check the law? Why would I do that? Yeah. There was a headline, he says, in the Tampa Bay Times, Frank White borrows $1 million from his wife, Spano said, apparently referring to this article, and it is herein linked, from February of 2018. I had never borrowed money for my campaign before, so, based on our own series of events and our minds, you see how bad this excuse is? This guy was almost Attorney General of Florida. But then again, Pam Bondi was Attorney General of Florida, and she's horrific. So I guess this guy could be next, right? Check this out again. I never borrowed money for my campaign before. Okay, fine. So based on our own series of events, whatever that means, and our minds, which is of no help, we're looking at each other in our campaign circles. Man, it'd be nice to have a wife with $1 million, wouldn't it? Well, instead of a rich wife, he found some wealthy friends. Spano told WTSP that during the congressional contest, he had a buddy say, "Would it help if I..." And I said, "Well, yeah, let me check." So that's two interesting answers. Well, yeah. Well, no, I don't know. right? Yeah, I don't know. I've never done it before. Let me check. So Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Maybe Attorney General says he'll check. So he continues. We believed we could do it based on experience. I'd never done it before and got some counsel that we could. And we moved forward with it and operated under the assumption that we could. And you know what happens, of course, when you assume, you make an ass out of yourself. Not me. You're just an ass. That's the saying is wrong. But do you realize what he's saying here in all of this? I had never borrowed money for my campaign before. So we believed we could do it based on experience. I'd never done it before. What a combination of sentences that is. I believed that based on experience, which I didn't have, that I could do this. What? And again, in this country, just to be clear, what the real problem here is, this is pretty obvious, and he's done it, and he keeps saying, oh, it's a mistake, or it was based on experience, which I didn't have, or I saw somebody else do it, so I thought that was okay. Don't show this guy any, murder mysteries or anything. But okay. This is all discovered before he's sworn in. And it's probably would have won anyway. I should just give him the oath of office. Let him be a member of Congress. No. Throw him out. Suspend him. Have him stand aside. Don't let him take the oath. Investigate this. But no, they did it and blah, blah, blah. We never do anything about anything in this country. No one ever pays the price for anything. I mean, I don't want to throw you into despair about Donald Trump never paying the price for what he's done. But yeah, the winners of elections here never pay the prices for what they do. Never. It just doesn't really work that way. So forget it. You just have to root for him to fall down the stairs, and that'll be his comeuppance. That's all you got. I'm sorry, but I think ultimately that's true. We can do our best to try to frame it up right and hold him accountable, and I guess you never give up trying. But if he fell down the stairs, I'd keep doing it too. You can impeach a dead guy. Go for it. I'd say continue with it. Don't let him rest in peace. Anyway, experts. So where did we leave off? Oh yes, he was saying. So we believe we could do it based on experience, which he didn't have. I'd never done it before and got some counsel that we could, bad counsel, and we moved forward with it and operated under the assumption that we could, which it isn't an assumption really if you got actual counsel on it, but whatever. However, experts consulted by the Times opined at the time that White's spousal assistance might in fact have been illegal. And in any event, White's race for state office would have been governed by Florida law, which they keep in Florida, and you can look it up, rather than federal statutes. White, by the way, later lost the primary. Spano also insisted in his new interview that his congressional campaign had disclosed the loan before it became public knowledge, which is exactly the same time as you disclosed it. That's when it becomes public knowledge, but never mind that. His language is inexact, and he's a stupid guy, so we'll give him some, just by way of explanation, we give him a little bit of leeway. I mean, I'd still sentence him for it, but he's very dumb and very inexact. So he says they disclosed the loan before it became public knowledge in the financial disclosure forms that all federal candidates are obligated to file. That, however, is flat out false, so it doesn't even matter that it's a bad explanation. As the Times' Stephen Contorno explains, and I don't know which Times we're talking about here, but it's the Tampa Bay Times, just by looking it up, Spano has failed to file those disclosures, or had failed to file them by the July 2018 deadline, only submitting them just before Election Day, after the Times had asked about them. Only once those reports were public did the paper learn that the money for Spano's questionable loans came from his friends. All right, so once again, here in this country, we never make anybody pay, but that guy should have been tossed out on his ass, and all the votes that he's cast so far are invalid. But again, we don't enforce things that way in this country, and I don't know, maybe we should. But, all right, just add that to the pile. All right, let's see. Important stuff floating around out there, and I ought to get to, well, we'll move right on to this one. Jumping back to justsecurity.org, a fantastic resource and a great platform for those who write there. I believe I've got another Just Security piece still floating around that hasn't been read yet. And let me see if I can scroll down and find it quickly. That one. And then I was thinking of a different one, but there was one here. All right. Well, I'll have to find it. Maybe we'll start on this one and we'll see if during the break. I felt like maybe we should read them in chronological order, but it's not that easy to find the one I'm thinking of. So we may end up doing it backwards and then saying, aha, as revelations come to mind. But here is the newest of the ones that I've put aside. And an exclusive at that. This one from February 11th, written by Kate Brannon, again, at Just Security, an exclusive. Again, they love shouting out their exclusives. And remember, they were the ones who found the unredacted versions of the emails between OMB and DOD, Department of Defense, that revealed that they were giving ample warning to the executive branch that what they were doing with withholding the Ukraine aid was illegal for several reasons and on several levels. And here's more of it. Another exclusive, new unredacted emails show how deeply OMB misled Congress on Ukraine. So let's jump right into this one. Can we call you in 5? DOD is being extraordinarily difficult, is the first quotation in the piece here. By way of scene setting, it was almost 6 p.m. on Monday, August 12th, and Mark Paoletta, the general counsel at the Office of Management and Budget, I'm giving it a dramatic reading here, wanted to talk to his boss, Russell Vogt, about, he was the acting director of OMB, about President Donald Trump's hold on military assistance for Ukraine. Got it? Mark Paoletta wants to talk to his boss, Russell Vogt, or I don't know how he pronounces it, V-O-U-G-H-T. The acting director, yes. Acting! Right, director of OMB, while the acting chief of staff has left the job behind, of course, right? So, he wants to talk to him about Trump's hold on military assistance for Ukraine. When the Trump administration released this email under court order to the nonprofit group American Oversight on January 22nd, Pauletta's complaint about DOD was redacted. Just Security obtained this email without the redactions, as well as others released on January 22nd, under the condition that they not be reprinted. Under the similar to the unredacted emails Just Security reported on in January, these new emails shed further light on the standoff that took place between the Pentagon and OMB over Trump's hold on Ukraine funding. So how is it they're reprinting them if they're, I don't know. That's an issue they'll have to deal with, not me. I get to just read it. They confirm that OMB, including the General Counsel's office, was fully in the loop about the Pentagon's concerns and took active steps to bury them. They also exposed the extent to which OMB misled and even lied to the Government Accountability Office, GAO, a congressional investigative body, as the GAO tried to understand the circumstances surrounding the funding hold. To this day, and through these redacted documents, OMB is continuing its efforts to keep its knowledge of the Pentagon's legal worries a secret, blacking out portions of the emails where DOD officials voiced their concerns and where OMB staffers acknowledged them. The Washington Post reported earlier this month that Paoletta reviewed the redactions before the documents were released. This would include his August 12th email to Vogt. So, why was he so frustrated with the Defense Department? It had come time for OMB to issue a new apportionment footnote, the technical process being used to withhold the money. Remember that from our initial reading? And DOD wanted to put it in writing that these delays were now putting the full $250 million for Ukraine at risk. That's because with each day that passed, it was becoming increasingly difficult for the Pentagon to be able to spend all the money by September 30th, the last day of the fiscal year, should the president change his mind and lift the hold. If DOD didn't spend all the money in time, it would be returned to the U.S. Treasury Department, violating the Impoundment Control Act, which mandates the executive branch spend money as Congress appropriates it. But it was Pauletta's view that when the new footnote was issued, it shouldn't mention any of this. This is what he wanted to discuss with Vogt. While we don't know what the two men discussed that evening, we do know that OMB won this battle because the next time the hold was extended, it did not contain the Pentagon's warning. However, Several months later, we also know that the Pentagon was right. The hold violated the Impoundment Control Act, not to mention it was part of a larger pressure campaign to get Ukraine to announce an investigation into former Vice President Joe Biden. When Trump finally lifted the hold on September 11th, DOD did everything it could to get the money out the door by September 30th, but it was too late to be able to spend all of it. In the end, $35 million of the Ukraine funding lapsed and required new congressional legislation to make it available again. While OMB was fully aware that this is what was at stake, it has tried to hide that fact from Congress and the public. And remember that a large part of the president's defense argument in the so-called impeachment trial was the no harm, no foul excuse, right? Which just wasn't true. Anyway, while these emails provide new evidence about how and why the Trump administration withheld military assistance to Ukraine, the Senate never subpoenaed them or any other documents or witnesses in Trump's impeachment trial. If it had, senators, as well as the public, could read these emails in unredacted form for themselves, which is why they didn't do it. The Senate acquitted the president last week. Here are the main takeaways from this new batch of fully unredacted emails. First up, everyone was in the loop. In a December 11th letter to GAO, Paoletta wrote that, quote, in fact, at no point during the pause in obligations did DOD, the Office of General Counsel at DOD anyway, indicate to OMB that as a matter of law, the apportionments would prevent DOD from being able to obligate the funds before the end of the fiscal year. Up until now, there was no evidence that the General Counsel's office at DOD had alerted OMB about these concerns. But there was plenty of documentary evidence showing its comptroller's office had. Acting Pentagon Comptroller Elaine McCusker sent multiple emails to OMB throughout August and September outlining the Defense Department's concerns, including inquiries about whether OMB had started the impoundment paperwork for the Ukraine money. She had even shared with Michael Duffy, who's in charge of national security programs at OMB, a draft letter from the Deputy Defense Secretary to OMB's acting director, informing OMB of the Pentagon's concern that the law required notification to Congress through a special message proposing rescission or deferral of funding. And of course, we learned yesterday that she was, up until the other day, up for the permanent job as comptroller of the Pentagon, not just the acting job. She was going to be promoted to the permanent job, and her nomination has been withdrawn by President Trump in retaliation for her having noted this and it coming to light, I guess. And while the Pentagon may not have said the apportionments would prevent DOD from spending the money by the end of the fiscal year as a matter of law, it did warn that it could happen as a matter of fact. But still, there was no evidence until now that the Pentagon lawyers were also sounding the alarm. However, included in the batch of emails released to American Oversight on is an August 22nd email from Edwin Scott Castle, DOD's principal deputy general counsel, to Paoletta and CCing DOD General Counsel Paul Ney, N-E-Y. In other words, here is an email directly from DOD's General Counsel's office raising the kind of concerns Paoletta claimed he didn't know about in his letter to GAO. While most of Castle's email has been blacked out, Just Security was able to view what was underneath the redaction. So it reads in whole here, Sir/Mark. Who is he sending this to? Paoletta and somebody else too. But that's a privacy interest redaction there. Elaine McCusker asked that I contact you and underscore her ongoing discussions with Mike Duffy concerning DOD's obligation of funding for the USAI. As I know you appreciate, expediting the interagency review of the USAI, which wasn't even really going on, will facilitate DOD's ability to fully and prudently obligate all $250 million appropriated for the initiative by September 30th, the date on which the funds expire. Thanks for your assistance in moving that review along. As you know, we're currently operating under an OMB-directed pause in obligations until August 26th. We previously obligated approximately $22 million, and the Defense Security Cooperation Agency recently distributed $126 million to the mildeps. I don't know what the DEP is, but okay, for military deputies, I don't know. For execution. Those funds are pending obligation and will not be obligated until OMB approves and OSD directs. Obligation deadlines for the remaining $102 million presumably are in the early to mid-September timeframe. So again, a warning that they were running out of time, all blacked out. Castle's email also mentions that staffers on Capitol Hill are asking DOD about the hold on Ukraine funding. He tells Paoletta that a congressional delegation traveling in Ukraine earlier in August heard that the money had not been obligated and wanted to know why. This seems to contradict a point that Trump's defense team made repeatedly throughout the impeachment trial, that Ukraine didn't know about the funding hold until Politico reported it on August 28th. There is other evidence that also upends this Trump team argument. But who cares? We don't want the evidence of it. The Trump team lied about the knowledge inside Ukraine of the hold. The congressional team was there in early August, and they found out that the money had been held. How did they find out that the money had been withheld? They asked Ukrainians, hey, how's it going with that money we sent you? And they said, what money? You haven't sent us anything. And that's immediately, at that point, they know. Not only do congressional staffers know, but they found out from the Ukrainians. 4 days later, on August 26th, Paoletta wrote back, and his entire response was redacted when the email was released in January, which is, again, a violation all by itself. When you find out that all of these things were redacted, not for real national security reasons, not for real privacy interest reasons, but to protect the president and his staff from political embarrassment, that by itself, I don't know whether, I mean, you could get yourself impeached for it, certainly, but it rises to the level of a serious concern and illegality. But, okay, that's not really what we want to nail them on. But it's there. We'll be right back in a minute with more. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Lots more great commentary and article suggestions coming in. We'll circle back on those in a little bit, but let's continue with what's up in Just Security. I noted just before leaving, 4 days later on August 26th, Paoletta wrote back, and his entire response was redacted when the email was initially released. And it says this: Hi, Scott. Thank you for your note. OMB appreciates the department's concerns that funds for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, should be made available for obligation as soon as possible in order to facilitate DoD's ability to fully obligate the funds before the funds expire on September 30th. An acknowledgement, in other words, of exactly the thing that they denied knowing anything about at the trial. Or rather, I guess they denied, it wasn't that. I guess what we were just talking about them denying at the trial was denying that the Ukrainians knew about the hold. But that obviously is not true either. This particular redaction contradicts the claim that there was no evidence that OMB was aware of the problems that DOD complained about the possibility that the money would revert to the Treasury and be a violation of the Impoundment and Control Act. Here's direct evidence that that's not the case. But again, you all witnessed exactly what was going on during the trial. The Republicans told anyone who would listen, when they reported back to the press in their home states, well, I'm not voting to convict because there's no evidence. And the fact is, there is evidence. They just voted not to admit any of the evidence in the trial, saying it was the job of the House to produce this evidence. But it didn't. But even if it had, I suppose they would have been handed redacted emails in the first instance, and it would have taken until well into the trial or well after the trial in order to get them unredacted. It's just by some other way. We still don't know the mechanism exactly by which Just Security came into possession of these things unredacted. Anyway, the letter continues after giving us the evidence we need. However, the interagency process to determine the best use of these resources is still ongoing. It really isn't. and until such process is resolved, such funds shall remain unavailable for obligation for the USAI. That said, OMB has not taken any action that would impair the department's ability to process these funds in order to obligate them in a timely manner, and certainly not later than September 30th. That's presumptive, of course. They have taken actions that would impair the department's ability to process the funds. That's what the warning is. Pursuant to presidential delegation, OMB has a responsibility to carry out Section 1512 of Title 31 U.S. Code, which directs that appropriations should be apportioned by time, purpose, or a combination of both. As such, it is OMB's responsibility to ensure that any apportionment of appropriations is consistent with the administration's policy priorities, to the extent such priorities are supported by the law. To ensure that OMB's apportionment action is consistent with the President's policy priorities, OMB has included a footnote on an apportionment directing that the Department may not obligate funds available for the USAI until an interagency process has been resolved to determine the best use of those funds. OMB's original footnote for the USAI funds and emails to DoD staff explaining the footnote made clear that even while operating under the footnote, DoD could proceed with all steps necessary short of actually obligating the funds, including being authorized to run any competitive bidding processes for the obligation of these funds. In addition, your chart set forth that although a great majority of the funds would be committed by mid-August, the Department would not obligate such funds until mid to late September. As noted in a previous email to the Department, commitments are not legally binding obligations under the recording statute, and therefore the Department's commitment of these funds would not be impacted by the OMB footnote. Therefore, to the extent that the information captured in your chart is still accurate and that the Department would still plan to obligate the USAI funds by mid to late September, we still see no reason why the footnote would impair the Department's ability to obligate the funds before they expire. It is our understanding that the interagency process to determine the best use of the USAI funds will be resolved in the coming week, and that following the resolution of such process, the Department will have sufficient time to obligate these funds before the funds expire on September 30th. This is a long email. In addition, with respect to the USAI funds, approximately $8.5 million, that are listed on the chart as being ready to obligate last week, we were surprised to see this entry given DoD has represented that the Department had to start moving forward on all funds immediately in order to make sure the funds are obligated before September 30th. Given that these funds were ready to be obligated in less than a week, and that the President wanted to run a policy process on these funds, we believed it was imperative not to undermine the President's prerogatives on determining where foreign military assistance is spent, consistent with his policy preferences, and of course consistent with the law. Of course, yeah, sure. As you know, this account allows for a wide variety of spending for Ukraine-related activities and is not limited to this particular spending. Given that we expect this policy process to be complete this week, we are not aware of any reason why the Department would not be able to obligate these funds as currently planned within 48 hours of the decision, and therefore well before September 30th. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, Mark. Shall we explain it, or we'll let them explain it? Let's see what they say about it. If we feel it's insufficient, we'll add some more. In his carefully worded note back to Castle, Paoletta acknowledges the concerns coming from the DoD's General Counsel's office, the very thing he doesn't do in his letter to GAO. He goes on to remind DoD that it is supposed to be doing everything it can, up until actually spending the money, to get ready for the moment when, or if, the President lifts the hold. This is OMB's way of saying, the President's hold shouldn't cause any delays if you take all of these preparatory steps, and if it does screw things up, that's going to be on you, the Defense Department. I mean, it isn't, but they're just saying they'll put it on them. They'll just say that you didn't do it right, even though there's a lot that goes into preparation that requires more certainty on the part of those expecting the money, that is, the contractors. It's a defensive posture to counter the growing frustration coming from the Pentagon and a reflection of the tension between the two departments. But in response to a question from the Wall Street Journal in January, OMB spokeswoman Rachel Semmel said, There was agreement every step of the way between DOD and OMB lawyers, who were responsible for working out the details of the hold in line with the president's priorities. There clearly isn't. In his email to Castle, Paoletta, once again, another episode of How to Read a Trumpster comment. There was agreement every step of the way. There was no agreement at any step. That's how you're supposed to read it. In his email to Castle, Paoletta also refers to an interagency process taking place, even though there is no evidence of this, and notes that this, quote, will be resolved in the coming week. Previously released emails show that officials were expecting the Ukraine money to finally be released after an August 30th meeting between Trump, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Defense Secretary Mark Esper. The officials thought that Pompeo and Esper would be able to finally change Trump's mind. Presumably, this is what Paoletta is referring to when he says the matter will be resolved in the coming week. But following the August 30th meeting, Duffy emailed McCusker clear direction from POTUS to hold. Trump's closest advisors had failed to convince him to release the money. So, by the way, the subtext of all of this is that the quote-unquote interagency process was the heads of agencies pleading with the president, don't be a moron, release the money, it's going to ruin everything. And him saying, nope, I'm going to be a moron. That's the interagency process. That's the euphemism they're using for it. Getting the idiot president to change his mind is now an interagency process. It wasn't the first time senior OMB officials thought the problem would be quickly resolved with a conversation with the president. On August 11th, Duffy emailed McCusker to say, Elaine, just got off the phone with Russ, that's Russ Vogt. We are working to get a phone call with the president on this topic tomorrow to get this resolved. I will let you know as soon as I know what time it will take place. And then another redacted email. Meanwhile, the email from DOD's principal deputy counsel, general counsel rather, isn't the only new evidence showing that Paoletta was fully aware of DOD's concerns. Within the batch of emails released to American Oversight are also multiple examples of Duffy forwarding his correspondence with McCusker on to Paoletta. This includes her August 12th email to Duffy, in which she proposes adding new language to the footnote indicating the Pentagon's concerns about time running out. I don't know if we read the whole thing here, but it begins this way. Mike, current apportionment documents indicates we should be executing USAI today. We'll need revised written guidance ASAP for further pause and can no longer say the pause will not preclude timely execution. Well, maybe we'll read the whole thing. One option for revised language below, taking the pause from now till this Friday. I've copied our general counsel team above. Time is critical in getting this revised direction. Amounts apportioned but not yet obligated as of the date of this apportionment for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative are not available for obligation until August 16, 2019, to allow for an interagency process, that fake one, to determine the best use of such funds. Based on OMB's communication with DOD, on August 12, 2019, OMB understands from the department that this additional pause in obligations may not preclude DOD's timely execution of the final policy direction, but that execution risk increases with continued delays. DOD may continue its planning and casework for the initiative during this period. So in other words, she's saying, you got to put this in the footnote. You got to let people know that we're really at risk here with every delay. Duffy forwarded her note to Paoletta, writing FYSA. I don't even know what that, for your, I don't know. Stupid ass. Man, I don't use those abbreviations. I hate those abbreviations. And it irritates me every time I see an FYI. But okay. To which Paoletta responded with his own alternative language, which basically excised the Pentagon warning. Amounts apportioned but not yet obligated as of the date of this apportionment for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative are not available for obligation until August 16, 2019, to allow for an interagency process to determine the best use of such funds. DOD may continue its planning and casework for the initiative during this period. Just taking out the part that says that execution risk increases with continued delays. It was after this back and forth, all of which is redacted, by the way, that Paoletta complained to Vogt that DOD was being extraordinarily difficult. Meanwhile, McCusker told Duffy that Pauletta appears to continue to consistently misunderstand the process and the timelines we have provided for funds execution. When it released this email from McCusker, the Trump administration blacked out her words. As the funding hold continued into September, concerns only intensified. In a September 6th email, an OMB official asked Duffy, "Did the Office of General Counsel confirm that another extension won't violate the Impoundment Act?" Duffy responded, "I'm waiting for the confirmation and won't sign until I receive it." Clearly, the legality of what they were doing was being questioned, not just by DOD officials, but by OMB staffers, too. While OMB's senior lawyers like Pauletta kept signing off on it at the time, GAO concluded in January that holding the Ukraine funding was a clear violation of the Impoundment Control Act, and it was not a tough call. Now, why was the hold in place and why was it lifted? Central questions. The emails also show OMB and Pentagon staffers fielding multiple requests from Capitol Hill in early August, before the hold was made public, asking, why is the money being held up? And then, after the hold is lifted on September 11th, journalists start asking what happened to get it lifted. No one seems to have any good answers. On August 23rd, after an OMB staffer talks with someone in the office of Representative Mac Thornberry of Texas, Republican of course, the staffer reports he's not super worked up or anything, just looking for information, but I didn't really have much beyond our timeline here with the apportionment. On August 27th, a journalist emailed OMB's press office asking about the hold on the Ukraine money, and Duffy is copied on the request. That night, he asks the press officer, "How did this go?" referring to the response to this journalist. The press officer writes back, "I am ignoring." Another OMB staffer tells Duffy on September 6th that someone from the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense is asking about Ukraine, but that they have a couple of days to put them off if needed. So, what about this interagency review? In the emails, officials sometimes refer to a deliberative or interagency process taking place to review the Ukraine funding, but by early August there is no sign that any such review is taking place. Laura Cooper, I have to pause here for a second and grab a news story. Laura Cooper, who oversees Ukraine policy at DOD, testified to House investigators that she participated in a series of interagency meetings on Ukraine military assistance in late July, but that in these meetings, unanimous support was voiced that the hold should be lifted. At every meeting, the unanimous conclusion was that the security assistance should be resumed, the hold lifted. Ambassador Bill Taylor also testified. As for Ukrainian corruption, DOD had certified that Ukraine met its statutory anti-corruption requirements in May. According to Taylor, the Pentagon was asked at some point in late July to perform an analysis of the effectiveness of the assistance, and within a day returned its response. The assistance was effective and should be resumed. DOD also provided the White House with requested information about burden sharing with European allies in June, and then never heard anything back about it. So basically, every excuse that Trump came up with was refuted instantly by the Defense Department, and then he just said, well, I don't care what the truth is. Or at least, I don't care what they say it is. I mean, we can't always trust the Pentagon to be forthright and honest about everything, but he just basically was saying, well, I think my conspiracy theories tell me that this is true and that is true. Well, what do you think, Pentagon? Pentagon says, no, we don't think it's true. Well, who cares? It's true in my mind, so I'm just not doing anything. That's the interagency review. On September 12th, following the hold being lifted, Duffy sent draft talking points to another OMB staffer, noting that the deliberative process should only be referenced if asked. These talking points were fully redacted when the emails were released publicly. So what were their talking points that they didn't want you to know about? 1. The President has decided to release all military and security assistance funding to Ukraine, and the Departments of Defense and State have been notified to proceed with the obligation of those funds. 2. The administration supports Ukraine's effort of reform and self-defense, and these funds will advance Ukrainian efforts toward those ends. 2A. With this funding, we will have provided over $1.5 billion to Ukraine, it says the Ukraine, in 5 years. Except you haven't been here for 5 years, so let's not get too excited about it. Number 3, the administration continues to strongly encourage our European partners and allies to increase their financial support of the Ukraine's defense in their own backyard. And then I guess 4, if asked, this was a deliberative process that the president directed to ensure the most effective use of these funds in the interests of the United States. Even if the president were holding up the funds for legitimate policy reasons and not part of a corrupt scheme to tarnish his political opponent, he did not have the authority to do so. As GAO concluded, faithful execution of the law does not permit the president to substitute his own policy priorities for those that Congress has enacted into law. These emails reveal that DOD was worried about exactly this, and that OMB didn't want to hear it and didn't want anyone to know about it either. And now with these redactions, it doesn't want the public to hear it either. And neither did anybody in the Senate, apparently, on the Republican side, who all voted to say, yes, we understand that the president's defense asserts the direct opposite of the truth as documented by these emails. So, please don't show us those emails. That's that. Wow. Okay. So very interesting and fills in more blanks. I mean, it doesn't change the basics of the story. It just gives you more to be frustrated about, I suppose, and more detail in how to be frustrated and about exactly what you should be frustrated. Ballerina X, meanwhile, sends us this information from Jim Acosta, who tweets that Hope Hicks, how does she do it? Hope Hicks is coming back to the White House. White House official confirms. So I guess he just couldn't do without his pants being steamed, whatever that may mean, by Hope Hicks. Okay, well, sure. Why not? That's just terrific news. Okay. Yeah, and here's Albert Titus coming in here with this thing too. How does she do it? Everybody wants to know how I am, why I'm not yet saying how does she do it. How does she do it, though? That's a good question. But back to, back to the good old days, I guess, of Hope Hicks being around because she was so extremely important to people for some weird reason. Okay, let's see. There's more, but let's see. I'm not certain which of the many directions the various archives in Pocket would call out, let's see, as next. Yeah, here's an interesting thing. I don't think did we bring this up? I'm not sure. I caught this one the other day and put it aside. And again, our friend NYC Southpaw is involved in this, although I have the tweet of someone else here, and I can't work out how to pronounce some of these names, but KD by proxy is the Twitter handle here. I decided, says KD, to do a separate thread on this because it's small stuff and it's funny. At least ex-Hill staff are funny. So here's a letter from Senators Grassley and Johnson sent to Treasury asking for information on Hunter Biden, right? And you remember that story. I think we did discuss that one. NYC Southpaw noted for us, and I think that's where we left off. We noted the fact that Grassley and Johnson were requesting from Treasury information, including any possible suspicious activity notices that involve either of the Bidens in any bank transfers, and that those things are usually very closely held, and Treasury not only turned them over, but turned them over very quickly, while all Democratic requests for information from Treasury, in particular those requests about, hey, what's going on with those tax returns from the president? Why can't we see them, as the law would indicate we have a right to do? Mnuchin, basically, in being asked about this, said, well, there are two different sorts of requests. Not that they're coming from Republicans versus Democrats. Except, of course, Republicans were asking for information that usually is not released publicly under any circumstances. And the Democrats were asking for information to which they are entitled by law and weren't getting it. But there's a new thing that's being pointed out here by Ira Goldman is his name, KD by proxy. Don't ask me why, but don't ask me why my handle is different either. Okay. KD, by the way, is Knee Defender. He's the guy that came up with the device that you use on an airplane to prevent your knees from being smashed when the person in the row in front of you reclines too far too fast. Got it. Anyway, that mystery solved. What's the issue? Here's the letter that Grassley and Johnson sent to Treasury for info on Hunter Biden, and on page 2 they reference their authority to request it. And he says you should look closely. Now here's NYC Southpaw's reproduction of that letter, and we won't read the entirety of the letter, but on page 2 they say, where do they bring this up? The Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs is authorized by Rule 25 of the Standing Rules of the Senate to investigate, quote, the efficiency, economy, and effectiveness of all agencies and departments of the government. Additionally, Senate Resolution 62 of the 115th Congress authorizes the committee to examine the efficiency and economy of all branches and functions of government with particular references to, among other things, 1, the effectiveness of present national security methods, staffing, and processes. So that's the relied upon authority here. They have the right to, or the authority to examine the efficiency and economy of all branches and functions of government with reference, in particular, to the effectiveness of national security methods, which suspicious activity notices are a part, right? So, that raises interest for Ira Goldman here, who then continues and says, if you look, you see in the footnote, they cite as their authority Senate Resolution 62 from the 114th Congress, which is interesting because I think in the body of the letter they say 115th. And in the footnote they say, is that right, 114th? Yes. So I'm not even sure to which one they're referring. And let's see if he straightens out that discrepancy. I don't recall that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But being the ex-staffer that I am, he says, I decided to look up Senate Resolution 62 from the 114th Congress. Now, let me see, is the footnote correctly placed here? Yeah, okay. So they reference, 100. They say it's the 115th in the body of the letter, and the footnote says the 114th. I don't know if that resolves anything. Anyway, when he says, when I looked up Senate Resolution 62 from the 114th Congress, here's what I found. And it is a resolution initially, a resolution designating the work beginning on February 8th, 2015, the week beginning February 8th, 2015, as National Tribal Colleges and Universities Week, which would appear on its face to have nothing to do with authorizing the Committee on Homeland Security to inspect anything at all. But actually, that may or may not. Oh, yes, right. Okay. So clearly that's not right. So he says, I looked back in the body of the letter. There we go. There's our discrepancy is settled. I looked back in the body of the letter. I was going to say sometimes you have buried in unrelated resolutions weird things that they don't want anybody to find out about for some reason. But not the case here. So the 114th Congress's Senate Resolution 62 isn't it. So he looks back in the body of the letter and found that they cited the correct resolution, sort of. Please stand by, he says. Senate Resolution 62 from the 115th Congress has this in it. Here is Senate Resolution 62 from the 115th Congress, a committee funding resolution, which indeed, in Section 12, also provides the Senate Homeland Security Committee with certain investigative authorities. Okay. So now we're beginning to unravel this thing. However, there is still a problem. And one of the problems is that I need to take a brief 2-minute break in about 45 seconds, which means I won't be able to get the ultimate punchline of all this in until after the break, which just means that it's a cliff holder for the rest of you. But interesting that they, well, first of all, right off the bat, that they screwed things up in the letter, right? They couldn't even get the right citation correct. But okay, so fine. Here we are. Senate Resolution 62 from the 115th Congress is, I'm going to have to blow it up here to take a look at it. Yeah, like you said, a committee funding resolution that in Section 12 provides this authority, and the punchline, therefore, will also be found in Section 12, which I'll read you as we return after this break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue. Are you ready for the cliffhanger reveal here? So, Senate Resolution 62 of the 115th Congress, the authority that is held out by, as purported, anyway, always check the paperwork, I guess. Here's another example of it. By Senators Grassley and Johnson to be the authority under which they are able to request the suspicious activity reports, if any exist, on Hunter Biden from the Treasury Department. So, notice it says here the dates in the resolution. Okay, shall we take a look at the dates in the resolution? So here it is, the screen grab of the print of 115th Congress's Senate Resolution 62, authorizing expenditures by committees of the Senate for the periods March 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2017, October 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2018, and October 1st, 2018 through February 28th, 2019. Okay, basically, though, what it gets down to here is that it authorizes what it authorizes up to February 28th, 2019, and I think you now probably see where we're going with this. Now, notice the date, of course, on the Grassley-Johnson letter to the Treasury, and then look back at the resolution, because the date on the letter is November 15th, 2019. The date on the resolution, of course, says it's authorized through February 28th, 2019. In other words, in the letter Grassley and Johnson wrote to Treasury asking for confidential financial records regarding Hunter Biden and 4 other people, the authority they explicitly cited to make their request had expired. In sum, Treasuries sent Senators Grassley and Johnson private financial information about Hunter Biden and others in response to a letter that on its face cites no actual authority to request the information. Oh my, and I guess we could probably play this for that, right? Well, anyway, fear not for Senators Grassley and Johnson. All is not lost. Assuming that expired resolution had once granted them authority to ask for and receive SARs and related documents from Treasury, they now have that authority under a new resolution, Senate Resolution 70 of the 116th Congress. So there you go. That seems to extend the authority if it in fact contains the same provision. Okay. And now Ira says that this thread took off way more than he expected. At the top I found this funny / ex-Hill staffer funny because the wrong cites, especially to a resolution for National Tribal Colleges and Universities Week, meant bad staff work. But of course it is more than that. Assuming that there was no follow-up letter from Grassley and Johnson correcting those cites, or at least some sort of formal back and forth confirming the authority of the Homeland Security Committee to request these specific sorts of records, this means Treasury was sloppy too. And of course, no surprise there that they were sloppy. No one checks the paperwork on this administration. And, in the end, it may be that, most people might even accept the explanation. Well, there was a new resolution in the 116th Congress that extended this same authority. So if they had simply cited S-Res 70, 116th Congress, they would have been correct, and we would have sent them that information under proper authority. But no one did. And had they done it, they would have said, they should have said, no, we won't send you that information because you're not authorized to get it, and required the Senate staffers to do the work over again and do it correctly before you send it. But okay. Like I said, small bore stuff, but just another one of those examples where if you listen to me and you check the paperwork, demand it, check the cites, you would at least be able to force them to do their work better, if not deny them the information that they wanted up front. Though they should have denied them that information to begin with anyway. As we reported just the other day, let's see, I don't know if we ever read through the report on it, but our friend NYC Southpaw, writing under the real world name Lupe Lupin, if we ever got a pronunciation on that, at Yahoo News, taking note of that, and that's why it was NYC Southpaw who showed us the Grassley letter. I don't think there's any update on the fact that they weren't, in fact, authorized to make this request. But that's a fun addition to that story, at the very least. Okay. So anyway, just one of many areas in which the Trump administration continues to trample over everything. The rights of others, the line dividing the boundaries of what the presidency is and isn't able to order the executive branches to do, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Just sort of putting that out there. Let's see. Here's another interesting thing that we didn't get a chance to mention when it came up. Kyle Cheney, I don't know if he says Cheney or Cheney. Anyway, Congress reporter for Politico. We've heard his name quite a number of times and probably puzzled over it before. Tweeting back on February 5th, I took note but didn't announce to you, that there was news from the DOJ finally reviewing a 10-month-old referral from Adam Schiff. They've finally gotten around to it. What do you think? Alleging that Eric Prince repeatedly lied during his testimony in the House's Russia probe. DOJ wrote to Schiff yesterday, that would have been February 4th, apologizing for the delay. Unclear what prompted the move, either to take it up after the delay or to delay it. But important news to note if you really think that we're ever going to get to the bottom of anything under this Department of Justice. DOJ reviews allegation that Eric Prince misled Congress in the Russia probe. Schiff says Prince impaired the House Intelligence Committee investigation of Russian links to the 2016 Trump campaign. And by the way, this and the Roger Stone situation, and Mike Flynn for that matter, and Manafort, all lies at the heart of this, of the claims that Republicans used to escape responsibility for holding the president accountable on Ukraine. They kept insisting that the Ukraine story, like the Russia story, was a hoax because A, there was no evidence, and B, evidence that they wouldn't admit, of course, and B, of course, Ukraine was a hoax because Russia, after all, was a hoax. Russia, after all, a hoax because no one could prove that there really was any connection between the Trump campaign and Russian operatives. No one could prove it, of course, because everybody who had that proof to offer by way of testimony lied when asked for it. Person number one, Manafort, not individual one, but the first person they asked for it was Paul. I don't know who they asked first, actually. They probably asked Mike Flynn for it first. And he lied and is still awaiting resolution of his case for lying to Congress, and we discussed where that currently stands. Paul Manafort, too, was asked about it. He lied, and he's in prison. Roger Stone was asked about it. He lied, and he's been convicted for that lying and now awaits sentencing, and the president is interfering in his sentencing process and interfering in Mike Flynn's case to try to get his thing turned upside down as well and overturned, and he'll eventually end up pardoning all of them. But 10 months later, after initially asking the Department of Justice to look into whether or not Eric Prince, when asked about it, also lied, which he did, the DOJ is just getting around to that, and maybe they'll finish that investigation, maybe they won't. Another one of those problems of a toothless Congress. The inherent contempt power would have been best used here, but of course, we still have a lot of work to do. We've convinced, for instance, over the years, the Senate that they can change their own rules by majority vote. We've had some success there. We have convinced Democrats in the House that they can and should and must impeach the president even when they don't have the votes. The next big job, I think, is to convince them that they have the power of inherent contempt and ought to use it. It would be a flashy and splashy way of doing it to imprison the brother of a cabinet secretary in doing all that, but they might need to call upon those powers in the near future in closing the prison door behind the sitting attorney general as well. They really need to buff up those skills and be reminded that they exist and that it's their prerogative, and in fact our demand that they exercise this prerogative. If somehow we find ourselves with Donald Trump still purporting to be president, either because he claims to have won, with or without cheating, the presidential election of 2020, or has in fact lost it but refuses to leave office, or does something that or orders something done which is criminal and illegal in between this time and then. But this is just one of them. But 10 months they're sitting on it. And I guess really that should have been, maybe that should have been presented. Maybe it was presented in the trial where in answering Republican charges that the House should have done more and pursued more in court, they've subpoenaed Eric Prince, asked him the questions point blank. He lied. They referred it to they went through the regular process of what to do when they think someone lies to Congress, and they sent it, I guess, for investigation for, I guess, charges of statutory contempt, obstruction, perjury, what have you. But the problem is that runs through the Justice Department, and the Justice Department is hopelessly corrupt, and I don't know, maybe they thought they couldn't say that in the middle of the trial. Anyway, Kyle reporting this story on the 5th. The Justice Department has begun reviewing a 10-month-old allegation by the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff that Eric Prince, ally of President Donald Trump, repeatedly misled lawmakers during the panel's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. In a February 4th letter to Schiff from Assistant Attorney General Stephen Boyd, obtained on Tuesday, way back when, on the 5th, I guess, by Politico, Boyd expressed regret for the lengthy delay in responding to the chairman's April 30th, 2019 request. We apologize for the delay in responding to your letter, Boyd wrote, adding, the department acknowledges receipt of your letter and will refer your request for investigation to the proper investigative agency or component for review. Schiff initially referred Prince to the Justice Department and sought a prompt action, for what he described as a series of manifest and substantial falsehoods. In that letter, delivered to Attorney General William Barr, Schiff said that Prince, the billionaire founder of a military contracting firm, Blackwater, intentionally misled the House Intelligence Committee and impaired its investigation of Russian links to the 2016 Trump campaign, for which you should impeach the president, by the way. It's unclear what led the Justice Department to return to Schiff's request 10 months later on the eve of the Senate's decision to acquit Trump on 2 impeachment charges. The department said a Prince attorney did not immediately respond to requests for comment. U.S. Attorney John Durham has been tasked by Barr with reviewing the origins of the FBI's Russia investigation, which later morphed into Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe of Russian interference in the election. In his April 30th letter, Schiff highlighted 6 instances in which the information revealed about Prince in Mueller's report diverged from his testimony in November of 2017 before the committee. He homed in on Prince's meeting in the Seychelles in January of 2017 with a Russian banker who was reportedly close to Putin, an encounter Prince later told congressional officials took place purely by chance. Prince told Schiff's committee in late 2017 that he had no official or really unofficial role with the Trump campaign. He said he wrote unsolicited policy papers, and he forwarded to Trump advisor Steve Bannon, attended some fundraisers, and contributed to Trump's campaign. So there was no other formal communications or contact with the campaign. Then Representative Tom Rooney, Republican of Florida, asked. Correct, Prince replied, but a succession of news reports indicated that Prince's relationship with the campaign was deeper than he let on. According to a New York Times report last May, Prince helped facilitate meetings for high-level Trump campaign staff. So, what do you do with that? And the answer is, you sit and wait and do nothing and then watch during the impeachment trial while Republicans say, see, you should have gone through the regular order process, even though, as Schiff explained to everybody, the regular order process is chock full of loopholes and stumbling blocks designed to allow the administration to get away with pretty much anything they want. So, that's bad. I don't know what else to tell you about that. All right, let's see. One more thing, I guess, that we might be able to include, which I have found to be of some interest. I don't know whether we're going to get all the way through it, but I threatened you with it the other day, and I included it in the roundup. Maybe you read it, maybe you didn't. I guess we'll make this, for now, one last note on the Iowa caucuses, and that is David Dayen's work, also from around the same time, February 4th, entitled, and I can say it, so try not to stop me, Welcome to the Bullshit Economy. I was curious about that. And sorry to all the youngsters who are listening instead of watching Saturday morning cartoons. I think I've offended no one here. The Iowa caucus disaster, as he says, is a function of a broken economic structure that rewards con artistry over competence. This is David Dayen's take on how that stupid app got released into the wild in Iowa. The story of Shadow, makers of the app that utterly failed to deliver in Iowa, is a perfect example of the BS economy, which he names in full. In one sense, he starts, the Iowa caucus debacle will, like a nice pronunciation there, debacle. Okay, will last just a couple of news cycles. We have the data on paper, tabulated in front of tens of thousands of witnesses, and it merely needs to be collated. Eventually it will, and though the damage to the news cycle is irreparable, Joe Biden's disappointing outcome has been diluted in particular. The process will go on with an accurate count, maybe, but we found out that actually in the end it probably won't. Caucuses are horrible and probably a dead letter, but for different reasons than the delayed count. The real problems arise from the Electoral College-style distortions between the initial percentages and the final delegates, and the tacit vote suppression from forcing people to attend a 2-hour meeting on a weeknight when they might be working. But the spectacle has highlighted a much more consequential problem in America, something I have called the bullshit economy. We've seen elements of it all over the place. When MoviePass offers unlimited screenings for $10 a month. When Uber gets an $82 billion valuation for a low-margin taxi business it has never made a dime on. When WeWork implodes after the slightest scrutiny into its numbers. That's the BS economy at work. We have seen the farcical, I'm going to alternate here between bullshit and BS, of Juicero and the consequential BS of Theranos. Even at its highest levels, bullshit pervades. In fraudulent advertising metrics and fake numbers peddled to convince the world to siphon cash through Facebook and Google's dominant platforms. So many counterfeit goods pass through Amazon that the site might get listed on the U.S. Trade Representative Office's notorious markets list. Wow, I hadn't heard that one. We have endured the more comprehensive bullshit of the financial industry marking corporate progress by manipulated stock prices and air rather than productive advances for society. We had a financial crisis based on bullshitters telling us housing prices would endlessly rise. We have the bullshit of the private equity industry extracting value from companies through the skillful use of debt and other financial engineering without regard for whether the companies succeed or fail. The story of Shadow, makers of the app that utterly failed to deliver in Iowa, is a perfect example of the bullshit economy. It starts by being a tech solution to a non-existent problem. Iowa counties are compact. The largest one has a landmass of 973 square miles, and it's close to twice the size of the average county in the state. Even there, no major city is more than a 30-minute drive from the county seat, Algona. I hope I pronounced that. Well, I'll probably pronounce it wrong, but whatever. Even with that ancient technology of the car, you could have each of the 99 counties report final results within a couple of hours of the end of the caucuses. Somehow, the Iowa Democratic Party got sold that they needed to improve upon this, to disrupt the caucus reporting, and that they did. Already, the party had to increase what they would keep track of and tabulate, reporting the first set of results before the 15% viability threshold, the second set afterward, and how that translated into delegate counts. Well, now, whose fault is that, you might ask? Anyway, it wasn't clear why anyone needed to add another layer of complexity into this with the app, but the app's backers must have been persistent, getting $60,000, really nothing for the purposes of app development, to design a tool to forward their results to a central repository. Clearly, there was no meaningful stress testing of the technology, but there also doesn't appear to have been much training. Many caucus administrators simply didn't bother to use the app, attempting to call the hotline to report results. That got overloaded as the app failed, with everyone from 1,600 caucus locations trying to report at once. Shadow is the subsidiary of Acronym, a non-profit, apparently, with lots of connections to the Democratic consultancy, including veterans of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and David Plouffe, the Obama campaign manager, who sits on the Acronym board. MSNBC's Chris Hayes asked Plouffe on a late-night panel about his participation, and he swiveled in his chair uncomfortably and disclaimed any knowledge of Shadow or the app. Similarly, Acronym issued a statement positioning itself as a mere investor in Shadow without knowledge of their inner workings. But last year, Acronym announced it was launching Shadow as part of an effort to help Democrats win the internet and run better campaigns. The head of Acronym, Tara McGowan, is married to a Pete Buttigieg strategist. Okay, well, there's all sorts of relationships out there, too. Tara McGowan, by the way, I think we called her name the other day in one of the threads we read. I guess she's one of the Democratic operatives who takes the controversial position of basically fighting fire with fire when it comes to the Trump bullshit. Torrent. Anyway, all this doublespeak is a hallmark of the bullshit economy. Your mind doesn't have to travel to the nether regions of conspiracy, but you can hardly blame people for doing so. This is reflective of the rolling incompetence covered by confidence within the modern economy, especially when you sprinkle on the labor-saving promise of techtopia. When the bullshit economy fails, it robs people's belief in the basic bargain of commerce, the idea that you get what you pay for, that companies operate in good faith to provide quality service. But when placed in contact with politics, it just demolishes faith in the system. The bullshit economy spurs distrust. So, there we have it. An unnecessary app that narrows the supply chain of votes to the central tabulator, and when the supply chain fails, it creates chaos. We see this all over our economy. Useless services, narrow supply chains, magnified fiascos. As long as confidence men lie to the right people, they can gain entry and take on enormous responsibility until it all falls apart. We live in a country where you can spout New Age consultant speak charm a large foreign investor, and make off with your guitar-shaped living room with over $1 billion. Who are we talking about here? I don't know. Well, I guess here's the answer. Guitar-shaped living room with over $1 billion paid effectively to go away. That's WeWork guru Adam Newman's story, and increasingly, it's our story. The Iowa disaster is a sign that our economic structures are breaking down. It's an indicator, surely, that private enterprise has become a shell game where who you know matters more than what you can do. That's always been a problem. The bullshit economy has bled over into politics with the perfect president, but also the perfect amount of grifting and consultant corruption and unbridled tech optimism. This has long been a part of politics. Anything with that much money sloshing around will invite a little corruption. But the combination of political grift, the ardor for public-private partnerships, and the triumph of ambition over talent has created a fetid stew. The voters have a rare choice in 2020 to put clamps on the bullshit economy, to end the froth in our financial markets, and to put the needs of people ahead of inflated stock returns and boasts about revolutionizing rental housing or food delivery or juice machines. We don't have to live in the bullshit economy. We can reject it, or we can wait for the app to work and find out who our leaders will be. Interesting. Well worth the note and well worth the time. And there's definitely large grains of truth to be taken from that. Plus, and also, by the way, too many instances of the word bullshit to bother bleeping. So some of us out there who have been begging for more profanity in the morning broadcast should be happy. And that doesn't even count these days. That's something that they even let go by on network TV these days. So we won't be too worried about it. But it does give me pause because I have to later make the decision about how to mark this episode as clean or not. And I think I'll just say not selected for that one. Okay, let's see. One last item that will sneak in just before the buzzer here, just because it's been recommended to us, and the recommendations are usually pretty good. Jack Ox sends us this Salon piece that we definitely have to make note of here. But what a weird format it has come to me in for whatever reason. All right, I'll read you the headline. Senator Marsha Blackburn blocks 3 measures only days after new intel report warns U.S. hasn't done enough. What's she blocking? They're blocking election security bills, even as, they say, an intel report warns of yet more Russian meddling in 2020. She's basically standing in the way of unanimous consent requests to bring these bills to the floor and consider them. They are, of course, much needed, and we know exactly why she's blocking them. But that seems to be a role she relishes taking for some reason. Here it's reported, she's blocked Democratic efforts to unanimously pass 3 bills related to election security, despite warnings that Russia will interfere in the 2020 election. Mark Warner and Richard Blumenthal tried to pass the bill, which would require campaigns to report offers of foreign election assistance to the FBI, and another that would require campaigns to report such offers to the Federal Election Commission. The appropriate response, of course, is to say no, not to say thank you, but the appropriate response is to call the FBI. I guess a little bit disingenuous here in the sense that there wasn't very much likelihood that they were going to pass something like this by unanimous consent. And Marsha Blackburn, far from the only one to make the objection. It just basically falls to a rotating cast of Republican senators to make the objection. However, I suppose it would be a little less objectionable, slightly less objectionable, if they were to ask for unanimous consent to on a motion to proceed to the bill. But that, too, would be rejected as a loss of control of what happens on the floor by the Republican majority in the Senate. So they'll continue to reject it. And it makes a good campaign theme, of course, to continue to have video of yourself asking for unanimous consent either for the consideration or the passage of an important bill, and catching various Republicans, particularly those who might be up for re-election soon, being the ones to object. So a frequently played game, but well worth noting for the record at any rate. as we close things out. All right, let's see. I'm just sort of taking... Oh, yes, before I close things out, let's make note of Mike Musson's first comment of the day from a while back now. We need a reminder that the OLC memo, the infamous OLC memo to which we refer all the time, was never intended to set policy regarding the president. Its point was to argue that the vice president can be indicted. That would, of course, at the time being Spiro Agnew. Also, the OLC memo only guides DOJ. There's a number of reasons why we need to take a look back at that, including the fact that it was, when it was interpreted as protecting the president, it was because he was deemed to be too busy being tied up with important decisions of national security and making them carefully and calculatedly, which has just never been the case for this president, and no president has been further from it. All right, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Looks like they'll begin with Trump and Barr continuing to be excoriated over the Roger Stone case. We haven't talked about that much today. He'll take care of that.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
What else? A West Lynn, Oregon man reported workplace racism, so his boss had the town's racist cops arrest him. Sounds great. Republicans on the House Intel Committee skipped a national security hearing because they're still mad about being caught in a Russia probe, and much, much more, both domestically and from around the world. Stay tuned.